Yes, so we are discussing about the solar still or solar desalinator, which is a device which uses solar energy, the heat, and utilizes it for removing the salt from water or providing salt free or distilled water. The availability of fresh water or sweet water on earth is limited, and in many areas the salt ppm are so high that it should not be consumed directly. WHO recommends around 500 ppm of dissolved salts in water, and many times RO process, reverse osmosis process, is used to remove salinity from water. But this equipment uses electrical power, which many or most of the times come from fossil fuel power plants. So it's desirable that we rather use renewable energy source even for this purpose. Now, if you apply your thought, you will realize that actually sun is the biggest desalinator of the world, right? That is, it's the heat of the sun which is responsible for water, evaporation of water from the sea, and it makes clouds and again comes back as sweet water. So sun is the biggest desalinator employed by nature. And when if we use solar energy purpose, in a way you will be in a way you will be mimicking on a small scale, mimicking the sun on a smaller scale, right? So whenever possible, the solar heat or energy should be utilized for removing salt from the saline water or blackish water, right? Okay. So the salt content is many times given in terms of ppm, that is parts per million. ppm means 1 out of million, so 10 raised to 6. So whatever are the ppm given, if you divide it by 10 raised to 6, then it will give you the mass fraction, right? So if it is 2000 ppm, then it means that 2000 divided by 10 raised to 6. So the mass fraction of salt is 0.002. Okay. Okay, so how do you define mass fraction? It's nothing but the mass fraction of salt. Let's say it is mass of salt divided by mass of seawater, right? And then mass is nothing but number of moles multiplied by the molecular mass, right? So uh, and the ratio of the number of moles of, let's say, salt and seawater is nothing but the fraction, right? Mole fraction of the salt, and this is the ratio of the molecular mass of salt and molecular mass of seawater. And similar formula can be written for the mass fraction for water also. Okay. So the molecular mass of seawater may be found with this formula: XS MS plus XW MW. Okay, and the molar mass of NaCl is 58.5 kg per kilomole, and that of water is 18 kilogram per kilomole, right? So sometimes the salinity is given in mass fraction like ppm, but you may need the mole fraction, which can be found with this formula. Now let us understand the process employed for desalination. So this diagram schematically explains the different processes involved. Of course, it's a very simple device, very simple and passive device. By passive, what we mean is it doesn't use any form of human produced energy. It's just the natural solar radiation that is utilized by this device. Okay, so here you have a basin created, and you are filling up that basin with impure or blackish or saline water, and there is glass provided here as a cover. It is sloping on either side, so this is double slope design of a solar still or solar desalinator. Solar radiation passes through the glass and it hits the bottom black surface, and it gets, most part of it gets absorbed, increases the temperature of water. So the water vapor is formed, which is convected towards the glass. Now this glass is exposed to atmospheric air or wind. The air is moving. Air is not completely stationary. So it's wind. So it cools the glass. So it cools the vapor and condenses it, and such droplets are formed on the surface of the glass, which is sloping. So slowly that those droplets accumulate and slide down along the surface, inner surface of the glass, and they fall in the channel. In this channel, from the end of the channel, you can take out the distilled water. Right. So the phenomena seems to be very simple. Right. But if you do energy conversion and energy or heat transfer study, it is not that simple, and it also, in a way, you will realize when you study heat and the subject of heat and mass transfer, that it involves almost all types of heat transfer modes. Whether you talk about convection, forced convection, natural convection, radiation, conduction, everything is involved in this device. Okay. Though it runs mostly by the natural phenomena. Okay. So let us focus on the energy transfer, energy conversion, and heat transfer processes which are involved in this device. Okay. So this device, the earlier diagram which was shown, was a double sloping design. You can have a single sloping design also, the way it is shown here. So what you see, the photograph at the bottom is an actual solar still that we had employed outside our laboratory, that is refrigeration and air conditioning lab in our department, in mechanical engineering department. So we had done several experiments with that, with water, as well as we used it for something called liquid desiccant, right? Something called liquid desiccant. So that's actually nothing but a salt solution. Salt concentration is high. That's perhaps the only difference between saline water and liquid desiccant, right? And the type of salt may be different. So experiments were done with water as well as with liquid desiccant, and this is the experimental setup that we had prepared. The steel is actually a ready-made one. Some modifications were made, that is some extra insulation and a wooden box was provided. But basically the basin here, right, this insulated FRP basin, what is written. So inside you have fiber reinforced plastic box which works as basin, where you fill up the saline water, and then it is sloping, and you the glass cover is put over that, and this surface, the surface of the basin is made black in color, which absorbs the solar radiation. And then whatever phenomena I explained in the previous diagram. So there is condensation of water vapor on the glass surface and it slides down, and there is a channel here, and then it can be taken out from here, right? The condensate can be collected from one side of the channel. Okay. So it is single sloping design of a solar still or solar desalinator, and different energy conversion and heat transfer phenomena are explained in this diagram. So as you can see, the solar radiation, let's say the intensity is Ig, and you know the unit now, watt per meter square. So that enters through the glass inside this device. But of course, glass is not having 100% transmissivity. So what you get inside is Ig into tau g. Tau g is the transmissivity of glass. Now let's say the absorptivity of glass is alpha g, then Ig alpha g is absorbed in the glass, which slightly increases the temperature of the glass, and some radiation is also reflected, which is not shown here. So what you get inside is Ig into tau g. Now it enters into the body of the water that you have filled on in the basin. The water has its own absorptivity. So what is absorbed or what is striking the basin, the black color layer at the top of the or on the upper surface of the basin is Ig into tau g into alpha w. Right, so alpha w, again it is less than 1, so tau g into alpha w is the fraction multiplied when multiplied with Ig, that gives what strikes on the surface of the absorber layer. And then absorber layer again has its own absorptivity. So what is absorbed in the absorber layer is Ig into tau g into alpha w into alpha ab, that is the absorptivity of absorber surface. So that's what he gets converted into heat. So by absorbing a small amount of radiation, the water gets heated on its own, but the major component is what gets absorbed in the absorber surface, which increases the temperature of that surface, and the water is in contact. Water is in contact with the absorber surface. So now can you tell me the heat transfer phenomena which is involved in transfer of heat from absorber surface to water? How is the heat transmitted from absorber surface to water body? That's the question. So what is the heat transfer mode involved? You can try to be as specific as possible. Right? You have the basic knowledge of the heat transfer modes. So you can try to give me an answer. The heat transfer mode responsible for transfer of heat from the absorber layer to the body of water. This area is exploded and shown large in size here. This is the absorber surface, bottom line, and this is the body of the water, and different heat transfer phenomena have been shown schematically. So the suffix which are used also in a way give you the answer, right? That is, R is for radiation, C is for convection, E is for evaporation. Okay. Yeah, so it seems I have not got the answer yet. So I will have to answer it on my own. convection, but which type of convection, right? Natural convection, forced convection. So it's not conduction. Is it not conduction? So it's natural convection which is involved, right? So what you see here, QC is convection, but it's natural convection. Natural convection is that like because the water here near the absorber surface gets heated, its density decreases and it moves up. Its density decreases and it moves up, right? And then it gives away heat in different forms, and that way it gets cooled and comes back and again gets heated. So natural convective currents are set up. That's what is showing QCABW, convection from absorber to water. Okay, then we are focusing more on heat transfer between water body, or rather water surface, top surface of water, and glass cover, right? That's the most important phenomena which is responsible for getting you the condensate or distilled water on the surface of glass. So you can see there are three ways in which heat is transferred from the surface of water to glass. This is QC, that is convective, water to glass, WG. Then this is QE. E is for evaporation, water and glass. So there is like the air which is in contact with the top layer of water gets heated, sensibly heated, as well as it also receives moisture or water vapor from the surface of water, right? So that is another way in which the heat is transferred from water to glass. And there is a transfer because there is a temperature difference. The water is at a higher temperature than the glass cover. There is a radiative heat transfer between the water and glass also. So these are the three ways in which heat is given away by the water surface and provided to the inner surface of the glass cover. So what happens is, like because of this sensible heating, glass gets heated. This evaporation is like the moisture which is brought near the surface of the glass, and it also gets heat by radiation. This other two methods in a way are byproduct. Actually, what you mainly need is QEWG. You want to transfer vapor, but then it will not happen unless along with that there is some sensible heat transfer also. And because of the temperature difference, there will be a radiative heat transferred from water to glass also. If possible, you should try to reduce the other two components, the components other than QEWG, if possible. Okay, so what happens, that air rises up because it carries moisture and it is hot, so it is lighter, it moves up. Now this glass cover is in contact with the moving air, wind, right? That is actually carrying away the heat, and that is forced convection. Okay, don't say it is natural convection. The wind is not produced by the local heating effect. It is some on somewhat larger scale, the phenomena which is moving the air or moving the wind. So it's the forced convection over the surface of the glass, and glass also loses heat by mode of radiation to sky, right? So because it gets cooled, it cools the air which is coming in contact with this inner surface, and because of that there is condensation of the moisture from the air, and air also gets sensibly cooled and again starts moving downward, right? So the heat losses from glass are shown here, QRGS. So by mode of radiation the glass loses heat to sky, and by mode of convection the glass loses heat to ambient or air, right? That is what is shown by these arrows. Now, because the whole basin becomes hot, it can lose it will lose heat to the atmosphere through its walls also. It's not only through glass that it will lose heat. It will through its walls also it will lose heat, right? So from bottom it can lose heat. That may be the major portion because that's the maximum exposed surface, and then sides also it can lose heat, right? So if the basin is made up of some non-conductive material, then it will, and a thicker material, it will be a better option because there won't be lot of heat loss. This is a loss, right? Rather than converting it into useful heat of this evaporation, you are losing it directly to the atmosphere, which is not desirable. So it should be made from uh, not so good conductive material and thicker material, or let's say you may make it from metal, then it is advisable that you insulate it. Okay. So here, if it is made up of FRP, which is not a very good conductor and somewhat thicker, then generally what you will do it in case of the metal. But still, because we wanted to use it for more concentration of salt, where higher temperatures were involved, we applied extra insulation over the surface and also added a wooden box to that. Okay, so this is about the desalination process, which provides you almost salt-free water, and it can be used as potable water. Uh, One may have to add some required salts if it is to be used for human consumption. If it is for some if it is for some industrial application, then it may be directly used. But if it is for human consumption, you cannot consume, and you will also not like the taste of totally salt-free water. So required salts may have to be used, right? This QB is the heat loss from the bottom. So we have written it from the bottom of the solar steel basin. So it's written as QB, and from sides what you get is given a notation QS, that is from the heat loss occurring from the sides. Okay, so there is a small numerical which is given, which will give you some numbers, so it will help you to understand the things better, or in a way, like you may ask how much will be the output, water output. Of course it depends upon the size, so you may ask per meter square how much water shall I get, distilled water shall I get from 1 meter square area. So this example will give you some idea about that. So the data reads solar steel has water and glass temperatures equal to 55 and 45. So water temperature is 55, glass temperature is 45. Right? We have seen even much higher temperatures also, particularly that of water. But it's fine. This is just to give you some idea. Now 55 and 45 respectively. The constant C and N are determined experimentally and found to be this and this. Now these two numbers are given but not used in the example. If convective heat transfer coefficient from water surface to glass is 2.48 watt per meter square Kelvin, right? So this is convective heat transfer coefficient. You have some idea about that. That is, if you use it in Newton's law of cooling, Q is equal to HA delta T, right? So that H is heat transfer coefficient, convective. That value is given 2.48 watt per meter square Kelvin. Estimate the hourly distillate output per square meter from the solar steel. Now the formula that you are going to use, again that formula has been provided. Okay, so the formula is like this QEW, right? I'll make it a bit bigger in size so that it is more legible. Okay, so the formula that you are going to use is Q is equal to, sorry, QEW. EW is evaporation and water. QEW is equal to 0.0163 HCW, that is convective heat transfer coefficient for water, and PW minus PG. PW is the water vapor pressure. Both of them are water vapor pressure. W is the pressure at the surface of the water in solar steel, and G is the equivalent water vapor pressure at glass temperature. So the first is to be evaluated. Both of them are saturated water vapor pressure. The first one is to be evaluated at the water temperature. The second one is to be evaluated at glass temperature. So what is the water vapor pressure at the given temperature? You can either find them from the steam table, that is the saturation pressure at given temperature. So that would be available from steam table, or such a formula has been given where you can just put the temperature and you get the corresponding vapor pressure. So what you might do is like find the number with this formula as well as get it from the steam table and just compare the values. They should be very close to each other. The steam tables would be actually more accurate because they have been calculated or with the help of experiments which are much more precise. Okay, so and again another way of understanding the things better, again you might change the temperatures a bit here and there and you can check what is the result that you get. So at 55 water temperature, this is 15.15 kilopascal, the water vapor pressure. At 45, it is 9.47. So you put it in this formula and you get the heat transfer which is responsible for evaporation. So that is 229.6 watt per meter square. So this is responsible for water evaporation from the water body, and the same amount of condensation should take place and the same should be your water output also. So this heat can evaporate how much water? You are taking the latent heat of vaporization at 55. So you divide that Q with that latent heat of vaporization, that's nothing but HFG, what you get in the steam table. So at 55, you get it 2370.1. So you divide it by 2370.1, but it is kilojoule per kg. So to convert it into joule per kg, you multiply it by 1000 because this 229 is watt. Watt means joule per second. So you need to multiply this with 1000. And you don't want it per second, you want it per hour. So multiplied by 3600. So it gives you 0.349 kg per hour, right? H is not printed properly. 0.349 kg per hour. So around 340 or rather 350 milliliters per hour. That's the amount of water that you will get per meter square area. Okay. So let's say this phenomena continues for 6 hours in a day, then you will get around 2.1. Right? So that I think what you can easily expect, at least in like in winter, even I think this is what you can get, and in summers you can expect somewhat higher number in India because we have high amount of solar irradiance available. So 2 to 5 liters is what you might get per meter square area of a solar steel. Okay, so to find the place to install this, it can be the terrace, it can be rooftop, it can be some open area which is not utilized for other activities, and there one can produce this distilled water, right, for maybe for industrial applications or for removing the impurities or salt content even for human consumption. So this is about solar steel. Now we talk about another system which may be called a solar pond. Okay. So if the requirement of solar thermal energy is very large, if you use solar collectors like let's say flat plate collectors, because they are made from special materials, the cost can be very high. The solar pond is a large artificial or semi-natural solar collector or storage. So solar pond is not just, it doesn't just convert solar energy into heat, but also stores it in large quantity and for longer period of time. Okay. So in case of what happens in case of the natural ponds is that the solar radiation enters into water, some part of it gets absorbed, remaining strikes the bottom, it gets some part of it gets absorbed there also, and it may heat the body of the water, but you don't see that the water body is at high temperature, rather you find it at low temperature because of continuous evaporation that is happening from the top surface. But the water that gets heated rises up and comes on the top surface and loses heat by sensible as well as by evaporation. So the heat that is absorbed by the pond gets it is again released to the atmosphere, and this is because of the convection currents that will naturally set up in a natural pond. So if you want to use a pond as a storage device which doesn't allow the solar heat or the heat that is produced from solar radiation, if you don't want it to go back to the atmosphere, then one of the ideas could be increasing the salt content, particularly in the lower layers. So that changes the density, and that higher density doesn't allow, even if it is becoming slightly warmer, it doesn't allow that water to go up because of higher salt content in the lower layers. So this is what is done in a solar pond, and the heat is stored. Okay, so let me first show you a figure. Solar pond and salt and thermal gradient along its height. So this is a scheme of a solar pond. Okay, I'm just trying to make the diagram big, or I may zoom the thing. Yeah, so you can see that there are 3 layers. There are 3 layers in a solar pond. The top one is surface zone, relatively fresh water. The intermediate one is maybe called insulation zone, where the salt salinity is increasing as you go from top to bottom of that. And the bottom layer is a storage zone where salinity is the maximum. Now the solar radiation which enters into the bottom layer and those which strike the lining. Now there is a rubber or plastic lining which is put here. Otherwise, the water seepage will take place. You don't want to lose the water into the ground. So some lining is required, and again, it can have higher absorptivity. So that way also it will increase the heat absorbed. The heat that is produced here, because of this insulating layer, right? The salinity is, as you can see in this diagram, the salinity is maximum, right? This is along the depth. So salinity is maximum in the bottom layer, and it is going on decreasing, and at top you have a. So because of that, there will be a temperature gradient also which will be set up. Now, why is heat not lost to the atmosphere? What happens is, in this layer, the intermediate layer gets heated, but the water in that layer, in the lower layer of that, is having high salinity, so it's having high density. So even if it is getting heated, its density doesn't go to and rise up. So because of higher salinity in the bottom layers, or the salinity gradient, the natural convective heat transfer phenomena is suppressed, and that's how it works as an insulating buffer zone. And you are able to store the solar radiation, particularly in the bottommost layer. And from there, you can take the heat, right? So this, either what you do is you put a heat exchanger here and take the heat from here, as it is shown here, cool water in and hot water out, or this brine is salt solution itself may be pumped into a heat exchanger outside, and there you may use it to heat water. So the temperatures around 70 to 90 degrees Celsius can be achieved in such a solar pond, and it all depends how much heat you want, and accordingly you can design the size of this device. It's particularly meant for very high capacities. Okay, so the charging process is important. Generally, what is done is it will be filled with very high salinity or salt content, and then slowly you will add fresh water into it at different levels so as to create the gradient. Or sometimes the opposite thing is done, that is, it is filled with fresh water completely, and then you start injecting brine with high salt content from bottom, and at top, of course, you want low salinity water, right? So that's the charging process, and at the bottom there should be lining so that you stop the seepage of water, and sometimes you might also want to put insulation at the bottom so that the heat is not conducted away into the ground. That's some information about the concept of a solar pond. And such plant, the oldest one was put up in Israel over the Dead Sea, and there were two ponds, one of 40,000 meters square completed in 1982, and one of 210,000 meters square area completed in 1983, and 5 megawatt power station. So heat is utilized to run the low temperature Rankine cycle. Will not be the working media. You can have a working media like some freon or some organic material. And so that power plant was established, and then another much bigger one was This is 150 kilowatt, right? So that is a smaller one, which was established previously. But then with this larger area, this 5 megawatt peaking power station was right. So have heat, you can run a Rankine cycle with that, but of course you cannot expect very high efficiencies. Even the theoretical efficiency, you know about the ideal Carnot cycle efficiency, which itself might be hardly in double figures, let's say 15 degrees percentage. So the actual efficiency is generally not even in double digits. And one such plant was also put up in Bhuj Dairy in Gujarat, and it operated for a few years. And after the earthquake, it was abandoned. So there is a video which is explaining the concept of solar pond, and also gives some information about that plant which was used in the Bhuj Dairy. So these two videos provide you those things, and this diagram explains you how you can use the solar pond for running a low temperature Rankine cycle. So the hot salty water is utilized in a boiler, and then you boil the organic chemical or organic material, and then you run a turbine with that to generate electrical power, and then again condensed, and probably you can use the fresh water for that purpose from the same pond. So the Rankine cycle is run with the help of that. And this solar pond is able to retain heat for a very long period, over many days. You can even say a month or a couple of months. So it doesn't easily lose the heat. So let me play these videos.
The formidable powers of the sun have made it, for thousands of years, the object of terror, worship, and even intrigue. Although this source of seemingly inexhaustible energy has been the object of intense study since man's thought processes first evolved, it's only since the turn of the century that efforts have been initiated to tap this source. Our story today deals with a water body, a pond that will entrap solar energy. Another step in man's struggle to harness non-conventional sources of energy for the future.
The need to harness non-conventional energy sources has become imperative in the face of fast depleting fossil fuels. Among the various methods applied to harness the sun's energy, the solar pond technology seems to be a promising alternative. The recently constructed solar pond at Kutch Dairy in Bhuj is the largest operating solar pond of its kind in the world. Developed by Gujarat Energy Development Agency in collaboration with TERI and Dairy Development Corporation, solar ponds have the unique ability to entrap and store the sun's heat energy for months together, even during adverse cloudy season. And this is a distinct advantage over other methods of solar collection. A technology demonstrated by Israeli scientists way back in 1958, this concept of solar pond is inspired by nature. In natural ponds, the sun's heat energy radiates to the bottom of the pond and heats up the water. The heated layer of water at the bottom, being lighter than the upper layers, rises to the surface of the pond, creating a convective motion and subsequently loses heat to the atmosphere. This convective cycle continues, and hence the temperature of the pond usually remains constant. It is generally observed that at sea, when the water at the seabed has higher salinity, the water temperature is warm. The salt gradient solar pond uses this phenomenon of entrapping heat energy. It consists of three zones. The lower convective layer with a specific gravity raised to 1.9 by concentrating common salt at the bottom, the middle layer with a gradient of salinity, and topped by the upper convective layer of almost fresh water. To suppress wave formation due to wind, wire nets are installed every 10 meters. As a result of this special construction, the heat from the sun is retained at the bottom of the pond. This is because the lower layer is denser than the upper layers, and the convective motion is thus restricted to the lower region. It takes about 30 days to raise the temperature of the lower layer to 70 degrees Celsius and even as high as 90 degrees Celsius. The hot brine pumped into the heat exchanger vaporizes the liquid of furon, and with a resulting pressure, a turbine is run. This kinetic energy can be used to produce electricity and for processing heat applications like desalination and refrigeration. The renewable nature of this energy makes solar pond a viable proposition for the future.
Save about a lakh of rupees every year. The sun is now the object of a new kind of worship, scientific study. Millions are spent on solar sciences to develop possibilities of utilizing energy from this perpetually available resource, like solar pond technology. The National Solar Pond Program of India was initiated in 1983 with support from the Ministry of Non-Conventional Energy Sources. This 6,000 square meters solar pond at Bhuj in Gujarat is the largest operative example in the world. Solar ponds create energy by inhibiting the natural tendency of water to become lighter and rise upwards when heated. 3 salty layers of water with varying density are maintained with great care. Plastic nets control movement on the surface of the pond, and the aim is to trap heat in the heaviest layer at the bottom, made dense with large amounts of salt. Brine or hot salty water in the lowest layer is the basic source of heat in this process, which is lifted through a pipe and taken into a heat exchanger. The hot piped brine heats up normal water to about 70 degrees centigrade. With a minimal loss of heat, it is carried to the boiler at the Kutch dairy stationed nearby. The water is about 70 degrees hot when it reaches here. Naturally, the dairy needs much less lignite to now bring it to a steaming 100 degrees for the pasteurization plant, where between 25,000 to 50,000 liters of milk are processed every day. Heated feed water is also used up for cleaning and washing. By burning less lignite, the dairy can now save about a lakh of rupees every year. Energy expenses will be further reduced when the solar pond process heat also supports their chilling system and reinforces this project as a primary example of solar pond technology in the world.
So this technology is there or was there just in our backyard also, but perhaps we did not know about this, right? So when used rationally, these can help us reduce the environment related issues with the energy consumption. So we will talk about some more applications of solar energy in the coming lectures, starting with the process heating and cooling applications.